Welcome, friends. LostScarf here, and it's time for the newest episode of basically a podcast with Jaggerous.
Hello, what up?
And so, the format we're going here, of course, is I want to talk with a bunch of content creators, different forms, and first it's going to be with my friends, because that's going to go the most smoothly. So, first off is just introducing yourself and just how you got into content creation.
Oh, so hi, my name is Jaggerous. I'm also known as Francesca on the Killer Bits channel, and then Jaggerous is on my personal channel. How did I get into content creation? Oh, this is such an embarrassing question. Basically, when I was 15, I played a lot of RuneScape, and my boyfriend at the time started making RuneScape music videos. So, like, basically, you'd play RuneScape and you'd type the lyrics in like the chat, and then you'd like record yourself in different situations, and then over edit them all together. It was actually hilarious.
What?
So you'd over edit them all together, and then you'd upload them, and they're basically just music videos, but where instead of it being an actual music video, it was RuneScape. And that was basically the first kind of content that I made, and that's the basically what got me into video editing as like a hobby. And they actually did pretty well. You know, I wasn't famous or anything, but like I got a few thousand views on them. That's and then basically I went to university and graduated. I went to do a master's degree in Falmouth, where I was like trying to kind of get to know what the place would be like before I got there. So I joined the Facebook page for their video game society because I wanted to kind of make some friends, because when you move to a new university, especially if you're a postgrad, it's maybe a little bit harder. And John from the Killer Bits, who was on one of your earlier podcasts, he basically posted saying they were looking for someone to be a presenter on their YouTube channel, which was the Killer Bits. So I was like, you know what, that could be fun. Like I've done some video editing in the past. I really enjoy it. And I've always been kind of interested in YouTube as a kind of something to do as a content creator rather than as a viewer. So then I replied to that basically, and it was really funny because they wanted you to make like a short video, basically like a review of a game that you liked or something. And I, for some reason, at the time was playing loads of Animal Crossing on the 3DS. So I was like, right, we're going to do Animal Crossing, but we're not actually going to review it properly. We're going to kind of make fun of the game because you're the mayor. So we're going to make out like it's some sort of dictatorship. Ooh. Where like, you can control everyone and you're kind of like the kind of leader. And so I was like, right, let's do this. But then so dumb. Basically, Jaggerman, who's my boyfriend, we've been together like 4 years. I was staying at his place at the time, and he had this Korean flag, and I was like, this is perfect. I'll put this in the background, because I'm like the dictator. Except that it was a South Korean flag. It wasn't a North Korean flag. So I was just like, well, this I realized after the fact, I was like, this is completely embarrassing. Like
that makes it even better.
I don't. And like I remember trying to film my 3DS by like balancing my camera on top of like a stack of books. I could film the screen. Like, oh my god, it was the most like ghetto video. But like obviously it still kind of showed my personality. So then I did like a Skype interview with him because I wasn't in Falmouth at the time, and then that was basically how I got involved with the Killer Bits, which then was like a gateway, because I've been working with them for probably 4 years now. It's been quite a while. And then recently when Gwent came out, I wanted to branch out and also do my own, like just my own kind of Gwent focused channel. So something that was just like a kind of pet project. And that's been kind of picking up in the last 5 months. And so now here I am today, basically making very terrible jokes about South Korea.
That sounds hilarious though. Like, she got the flag wrong.
Yeah, it was. Well, now I know the difference. The white one
funny.
is the South Korea flag, and the red and blue one is the North Korea flag, in case you were wondering.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. And of course, I forgot to mention, no cam, so this is my favorite picture I've seen of Jag. It's the best.
Yeah, because girls gotta do duck face on the internet. If I know one thing, that is definitely how you pose for a photo.
That's the best picture. That cracks me up every time I look at it. So since we were talking about Gwent and the patch just happened, you're the right person to talk to about it. I do have some thoughts, so I'm wondering what your main thoughts are. I did watch your patch notes video on it, though.
Yeah, so CDPR well, first and foremost, I wouldn't call it a hotfix. They called it a hotfix.
Yeah, I
And
don't
then
know.
I think they changed like 40 cards or something ridiculous. Like a hotfix to me is like, if you have one or two problematic cards or there's a big game breaking bug, we're going to fix it. To me, this is definitely a patch.
Yeah,
But I honestly think it's been really good. I think for me as a content creator, I like patches anyway because it refreshes the game. And with card games, you get generally quite a stale meta quite quickly because,
yeah,
especially with Gwent, where you play, basically in Gwent you draw your cards and then you play one card per turn, and you don't really draw that many cards during the game. So in some ways, a lot of your turn order is already decided based on what you have in your hand. Like you've got
yeah,
a kind of a basic strategy. It's not like something like Hearthstone or something where you have to kind of think on your feet depending on what you draw. You can already strategize from seeing your first hand. So I think it's quite quick to start to optimize decks. But I think this patch on the whole, I really enjoy it. I think like it's shaken up the meta in terms of the top tier decks. Previously, a lot of people were just playing a lot of Skellige. I think they looked into it, and Skellige and monsters made up like 75% of the ranked matches that were happening, the ranked decks that were being played. So it wasn't particularly fun. So this has been quite refreshing. Now we can see factions like Nilfgaard are starting to do better. Scoia'tael's been buffed. Northern Realms has been buffed. So I'm happy about that. They've changed the ranked system to try and make it easier to climb. But I think the problem with this is now, I think up until about 3,000 MMR, which is, decently ranked, up until about 3,000 MMR, maybe a little higher than that, you basically get more rank points for winning than you do for losing, which means you can climb even if you have a win rate that's lower than 50%, which I don't agree with. I don't think you should be able to climb particularly high with that. Like, I think ultimately your win rate should be based on, playing against opponents of similar skill. And if you happen to be better than them, beating them, and that's how you climb until you get to where you're supposed to be. But now it seems like with enough time, anyone can get to, a relatively high MMR, which I think is good because then lots of people get ranked and it's an incentive to play ranked. And it means that you don't have to grind all of your time into ranked, because that was something that a lot of people were complaining about, was like, it had been really hard to climb to the point where, if you didn't have a lot of time, even if you were a very skilled player, you wouldn't be able to climb as well. I know I had that problem because, I'm a very busy person. So I didn't have the time to sit for hours and just play ranked, constantly.
yeah.
And I wasn't motivated to do it in the last patch, obviously, because it was a very stale meta. So I'm not entirely sure about that change, but I think that the rank system is something that they're trying to balance it, and they're trying to figure out exactly, how they want it and how, easy versus difficult they want to make it to climb. And I understand that this is something that you want to incentivize players, and you want players to feel like, ranked is a chore. That's obviously not something that you want.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, what do you think?
Well, as far as ranked goes, like, playing ranked in so many different games, it's really weird to figure out what is the thing that people are going to like about it, or it just doesn't feel like a grind. But at the end of the day, ranked is a grind. It's a ladder. It really is just climbing and falling. But what I hear, just if you put more time into it, because you earn more from wins and losses, it sounds weird to not just have things weighed evenly for loss and defeat. Because that was a problem I had with like Smite back in the day. One of the rank styles was you couldn't fall below a certain point, so all you had to do was just grind up and just sit in a way for just climbing up. I don't know. There's never been like the perfect ladder.
No, I think it's something that like is really hard to do, and I do think like CD Projekt Red, they're just trying to figure it out, and they're trying to kind of get it right. I don't know if I'm completely sold on their current system, but I do think there were problems with like, how quick it was to rank. For example, I think I won 14 matches in a row at one point, and I got the same MMR for every single match. And I feel like, if you're winning that many matches consecutively, there should be some kind of buffer to boost you a bit quicker.
Yeah.
Because it felt like, I was just climbing at a fixed rate regardless of how much I was winning.
Huh.
So that was something that I felt could have been changed. Because, I think if you're winning 14 straight matches, you're probably at too low of an MMR than you should be. But we'll see. We'll see how the kind of new system kind of works out. And ultimately, like in terms of the card changes, I think the vast majority of them were fair. I don't feel like they did anything, hugely game breaking or hugely like, heavy handed. I think when it comes to nerfing cards, CDPR tries to be relatively fair, and tries to, not go in with a sledgehammer and be like, well, this is overperforming, nerf it into the ground.
Well, I know there's one specific card, though, and that's Valhalla Mirth, the Golden Dragon.
Villain Trenton Mirth, yeah.
There you go.
I think that was a case of them trying to make the new player experience better. And I feel like Villain Trenton Mirth, so previously what this card did was you'd play it, and after, it's a gold card, and gold cards, there's very few cards that you can use to interact with them. They're designed to be quite like hard to interact with because you could only have a few of them in your deck.
Yeah.
But basically after 3 turns, what he would do is he would destroy the strongest point unit on the board, either on your side or on my side, depending on where it was, and then the second highest. And if there was a tie, let's say there were like 4-10 strength units and they were the strongest, he would burn all 4, and then maybe like an 8 strength unit, for example. So there was a lot of kind of nuance in terms of what he could burn and how you could play him. But the thing is, new players kind of, they'd hover over him and they wouldn't really understand what he did. And then, 3 turns later, all their stuff would get destroyed. And I think they'd feel like, how can I counter this? And the way you counter it is you run a bronze card called Dimmerity Shackles. And that basically, you can use that to lock a card, which stops its effect from happening. And you could play that one on gold cards, and basically it demotes them and locks them so that their effect doesn't happen. But I guess they felt that, this card was kind of stopping people from enjoying the game and that sort of thing. So they basically changed it. So they gave him more strength on his card that you play down. Strength is how you win the game, but he now only burns 1 card. However, there's also a silver card called Scorch, and Scorch, basically you play and it destroys the highest unit on the board. So it has the same effect as Villain Trenton Mirth, but it's not a unit, so it has no points attached, and it's a silver card. And you can basically run 4 gold cards and 6 silver cards. So to me, I'm not really sure how often you're going to be running Villain Trenton Mirth versus Scorch. Like, why would I take up a gold card slot when I can run Scorch? Unless you needed to run both, like unless you're going like super duper burn deck, which I can understand. Then that's the situation where I think you would see play, because then you're just trying to destroy everything if you're playing a very, very control heavy deck style. But
yeah,
personally, I didn't feel like he was that much of a problematic card. I think it was one of the cards you did just have to learn to play around, but that's kind of part of being a new player, is learning about cards and different strategies. And I don't think the strategy to, defeat him was that difficult. You tech in a Dimmerity Shackles, for example, but Dimmerity Shackles is, useful in a lot of situations. It's basically like a silence. So it's not like if they weren't running Villain Trenton Mirth, you wouldn't get any value out of this card. So for me, I wasn't entirely like sold on that change. I think he wasn't as problematic as maybe CD Projekt Red thought he was. But at the same time, I can understand that ultimately you get one first impression. And if you want people to stick around with your game, having a fairly decent new player experience is important. And nerfing anti-fun cards. I think anti-fun cards are something that, card game developers have to deal with a lot. So I think it's fair that they wanted to nerf it, even though I don't agree that it needed a nerf.
Well, my thoughts on it is I've only run into it once in maybe 50 or 60 matches. And that was all I needed to go I don't like that card at all. But it's a double Scorch. Essentially that's what it is. It's a double Scorch. And I was well, I don't like this card. But the realization is if you just have if you do a flood of small cards, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's if you're doing a heavy build kind of deck. And that's the thing I like about Gwent is there's so many different strategies you can do and just so many different counters and counters. And there's a lot of strategies in Gwent that I like. I'm still new enough at it that I see a lot of different possibilities, and I haven't run into just fighting the same thing over and over again. I've been running into quite a variety. The one thing I'm running into way too much is Northern Realms, and I saw you do the 37 card deck, and I've seen things similar to that, and I keep running into that more than anything else lately, and so I'm not a fan of Northern Realms right now.
Oh, I can understand that. The 37 card deck is so bizarre. It's a really fun deck because... So ultimately in Gwent, you can make a deck between 25 and 40 cards, but you only get 4 golds and 6 silvers, like I said, which are generally more powerful cards. So typically you run a 25 card deck because that means that your chances of drawing your silver and gold cards is inflated. Now what the 37 card deck does is it's just yeah, we're not going to do that. And basically you just play a bunch of cards that play other cards. So although you have a huge deck, there's a lot of deck thinning involved and there's a lot of synergies within those cards. And to be honest, you can get an awful lot of power out of your bronze cards just by doing that.
Yeah.
But But the risk in that deck is that you basically make a lot of units that you have the same strength. So you end up with a lot of kind of, 5s or 6s. And there's certain cards that are very, good against that. Like there's one called Yennefer Conjurer. And what she does is each turn she damages the strongest unit on the board. Now, if there's 2 units that have the same strength, she damages both of them. So she's basically slowly but surely whittling down the top the top strength on your opponent's side. And the longer the round goes on, obviously, the more damage she does. And the Northern Realms deck typically has a very long first round because that's kind of part of the strategy in it.
Yeah.
So then the longer you have that, if they play Yennefer Conjurer, she's basically just zapping your cards constantly. And once she gets them all down to the similar level, if you have like 8 6s, she's going to zap all 8 of them. And that's basically 8 damage in one turn, which is, on top of whatever they play, not good. Similarly, if you have a lot of units that have the same strength stacked on a row, there's a card called Geralt Igni. And what that does is it burns the highest strength unit on the row. And if it's a tie, obviously it burns them all. So if you have like 4 6s, and it only burns them if that row totals 20 or more. But if you have 4 6s in a row, for example, that is 24 points. You can then pop Igni down if that's the strongest unit, and burn all 4 of those 6s, and you get a 28-point swing because Igni itself is worth 4. Yeah. And the way you counter that, obviously, is you have a stronger unit on the row. So if I had 4 6s but also a 7, if my opponent played Igni, they'd only burn the 7. So it's a much smaller point swing. So there are kind of some strategies around it, but I don't think the large Northern Realm decks are too problematic ultimately, because you have more cards, they're generally a little bit less consistent. So you often have trickier mulligans, and you often end up with like a suboptimal hand. The one that most people are playing at the moment, I see a lot of, is Reveal in Nilfgaard. So that's the one where you show some of your cards to your opponent, and you basically look at some of your opponent's hand.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you buff certain cards or you trigger certain effects. And also the fact, like, just knowing what your opponent has is incredibly useful because, if you have perfect game knowledge, it's much easier to win. But I think at the moment the meta is not too bad. I'm playing a lot of monsters. I've been playing this fog deck that I really enjoy. Even though weather just got a big nerf, I've got this fog deck that's quite fun to play. Using Thunderbolt Potion, which buffs, sets of cards, and you make little trios and stuff. I've got a whole video about it. Like, okay. We don't need to go into detail.
Okay, yeah, because weather took a hit. Like, everything that I enjoyed took hits, so it shows how much of a noob I am, I guess. Like, I enjoyed making weather monster decks. I like the Ice Giant, just make a lot of ice decks, and I like Foglet deck a lot in monsters. And they made more of a push toward consume, I guess, with monsters. And then Shield Maidens were my jam in Skellige, and they got hit.
The problem with Shield Maiden, so Shield Maiden is a 5 strength card. Oh no, it's a 3 strength card. And then on round 2 it goes up to a 4 strength, and on round 3 it goes up to a 5 strength. But basically what you would do is you play this card on round 3, and when it's 5 strength, basically what happens is it's a bronze card, so you can have 3 of them in your deck. And it also does 2 damage. So you'd be like, oh, it's worth 7, it's not that big of a deal. But if it targets an injured unit and doesn't kill it, it doesn't matter because if it targets an injured unit, then what that will do is pull the other Shield Maidens from your deck. So effectively, if they have an injured unit on the board, which isn't that hard to do, you would get a 21-point play because there's 3 5s and then the 2 damage from each one. So a 21-point play from one bronze card, which is too much of a swing for a bronze card. You shouldn't be able to play one bronze card and get 21 points out of it. Like, the way they kind of balanced the power, that wasn't meant to happen. So the nerf they did was they basically stopped it from getting stronger each round. So now if you do the play, it is, I believe, 15 points, which is, a little bit more manageable because a lot of people in the third round are making tempo plays. So you kind of hold off on something that's a really big point play, and then you drain all of your opponent's cards. So eventually, you go into the final round and neither of you has very many cards, but the cards that you have generate a lot of points so that you can basically outpoint them. That's the kind of strategy usually. And so Shield Maidens were a little bit of a problem. Weather was a problem. I think Weather was like one of the decks lots of new players played. When I first started Gwent, I started with Weather.
Yeah.
But the problem with Weather wasn't at a new player level. It was that it was being used at a high level to do a lot of kind of questionable things. And it started to become very prohibitive because, like, if you weren't able to clear the Weather, basically, people could rack up a lot of points. And there was like synergies with Skellige, for example. Skellige has a card where every time you damaged your opponent, the card would get buffed. So you just throw out Frost because Frost does 1 damage to every unit on the row. And then subsequently, all of those 1 damages were becoming 2 points because you were also buffing this card that you had played. And basically, there were just a lot of a lot of problems with weather. And I actually think the changes they made to weather are pretty good. Like now weather, basically it doesn't hit every unit, it hits like fewer. So then it's not as prohibitive. But I don't think, like I said, I think it was a really good deck style for new players because like it was very kind of easy to understand. You know, I play my points, I play cards that play weather, then I get points on the board and I start to damage my opponents. And the weather effects then, you know, maybe draw out other cards or buff other cards, and that's really great. It was just a kind of higher tiers of play where it was becoming kind of silly.
Huh, okay. Like I've noticed like Frost Monster is a bit weaker, but Foglet deck is definitely stronger with how they did Flog now. Since it does like up to 5 targets, and that's basically kind of like Frost but different. But with the Shield Maidens, what I've done to still kind of have that pull is I get Quen. So that they're all 5 still anyway.
Okay, so Quen, yeah, the one that shields them. You're shielding your Shield Maidens is what you're doing.
Yeah.
So Shield Maiden deck.
+2. Yeah. And I like them, and Skellige's just a fun deck. Like, apparently I'm just doing the things that were broken, because Monster and Skellige were my jam.
Yeah, they were top tier last patch.
And there's 2 more things I want to talk about with Gwent. Like, one I just thought of realization is, it's one of the things that may be holding back Gwent a little bit is there's so many terms and ideas going on. And even with the tutorial, there were things that I didn't really understand.
Yeah.
Like, I remember doing Scorch to kill Geralt and didn't work. I'm like, why didn't that work? I was like, oh, it doesn't affect gold. It took a couple tries to realize that, and things like that. Difference between strengthening and boosting, weakening, and I can't remember the other one.
I know the one you mean.
Like, there's a lot of little terms,
I think it's
though.
Damaging and weakening, because I think weakening is the opposite of strengthening.
Yeah.
And boosting and damaging are the 2. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think CDPR's tutorial is a bit rubbish. I'm going to put that one out there. Like, the tutorial, it teaches you how to play Gwent, in that you understand that I need to get more points than my opponent 3 rounds in a row. Beyond that, it doesn't really teach you a lot of the nuances about things like card advantage that is really important, or, like you say, interactivity with gold cards and stuff. And the thing is, the worst part is that it used to state on the card, you know, damage the highest unit, not golds. But then they realized, and I disagree with this decision, but they were like, you know, basically because most cards don't interact with gold, most cards had that excluding gold's modifier. So then they felt like it would be less wordy to do it the other way around. So specify if a card does affect golds. But for new players, that's completely stupid, because you then have to just know that that's how it's done. There's nothing that tells you that's really kind of how it's done. So I think that was like kind of problematic of a change. And I agree with you that there's a lot of kind of terms and stuff that you need to kind of get to grips with. And they have kind of made the wording a lot better. And now they have that thing where if you hover over a card, it should give you little tooltips that kind of explain the main terminology.
Yeah.
A big one, you know, a lot of new players have is summoning versus spawning. So if you summon a unit or a card, you pull it from your deck. Whereas if you spawn a card, you just like create it from thin air. So with summoning, if you don't have a card in your deck, then the effect won't trigger. So for example, with the little Frost Hound you were talking about, the Frost Hound, what he does is he summons Frost, which means you have to have Frost in your deck. So he'll pull the Frost from your deck. But a lot of new players would put that in being like, oh, cool, this makes Frost. And then play it and be like, why is my Frost not appearing? You know,
I made that mistake.
Yeah, that's a really common one. And I agree with you that it is difficult for new players. That's why when I kind of started Gwent, the reason I kind of got into making content for it was that as a new player, there wasn't a lot out there for me to help me. And I was like, there's clearly a gap in the market here for beginner content. So when I first started and when open beta dropped, for example, I really focused on making beginner deck guides. And in those deck guides, you know, I don't assume that you have a base knowledge of Gwent. I will explain literally everything that I'm doing. And I got a lot of feedback, people saying, you know, this is really helpful. There's so many things that you've kind of clarified in these videos that aren't that clear. But I kind of agree with you that you shouldn't necessarily have to watch an external video in order to understand the game. But at the same time, with a card game, there are always going to be like, you know, nuances and details that you're not going to be able to learn easily through a tutorial. And you don't want like a, you know, a really, really long tutorial because that's off-putting as well. So
yeah,
I don't really know how you fix that.
I think they just needed to have an advanced tutorial. Simple, I guess. Like, or because they have the challenges right after you do the tutorial you can do. And the challenges, I like the challenges because you learned what these different styles could do. You learned that Scoia'tael kind of likes Mulligan, and they like I can't remember what it's called where you hold over for the next turn. They like
Resilient.
doing that. Yeah, they like resilience. And then monsters really like weather and consume, and then you have all the reveal stuff, and Skellige does some weird stuff with discarding.
Yeah, the challenges are really good for kind of showing you the different archetypes that exist within the factions. And I
Yeah.
think you're right. They probably could just put an advanced tutorial in and then, have it be optional. Because that way the people who feel like they already know don't have to do it, but the people who, feel a little bit lost. And there are definitely things like targeting of gold cards and summoning units and certain kind of nuances of the game that you don't necessarily pick up straight away.
Yeah.
But then the flip side is that because the game has a lot of these nuances and different kind of things that happen, it gives it more depth. Because you, at the same time, you don't want a game like No Man's Sky, which is like 8 million miles wide and only an inch deep in terms of the content. Like that's
Yeah.
the kind of other side of the coin where there's no depth to your game, so it gets boring very quickly.
Yeah. Before saying the last thing about Gwent, by the way, everyone, this is an open beta game. You can all play it for free. Since we talk about Gwent so much, so you can check it out. It is a bit complicated, but I like that it's a bit complicated. The biggest thing I like, which you don't know because you didn't play Hearthstone, is the golds, like gold, silvers, and bronze. They can all make a difference in different ways and strategies, but they're not, the golds are not legendary cards. Like they're really good cards, but they're not legendaries like in Hearthstone. Where legendary cards in Hearthstone can be really BS. And you can only have 4 of them in this, and everyone's going to have 4 golds, because you get a good amount. You get at least 4 golds when you first start the game, with all the decks. And honestly, like, they supply you with a good amount of cards right at the start for Gwent. You can be pretty competent just with the first 5 decks pretty much, and then you can build from there.
Yeah, they definitely improved the free-to-play model when they went into open beta. Actually, originally you started with 1 gold card in your, and everyone else, you go into like queues and everyone else would have 4, and that was, really, really restrictive. I remember I did my first game, and this guy who was in the chat was like, that was also in closed beta when there weren't as many lower level players to play against. So you go into a game and you get matched against someone who had, a whole bunch of better golds than you, and you had 1, and it was like, that didn't feel very fun. And I think, like I say, CDPR noticed these things, so then they made it so everyone, you start with basically 4 gold cards per faction. Well, you start with like some neutral gold cards which go in any deck, and then a faction specific gold. So you've got those options, which is really nice. And like you say that, you can only fit 4 into a deck, so it's already limited. And the way they balance them is they try to keep them all more or less around the same power swing. They're not, a lot of them aren't too swingy unless unless they're under very certain circumstances. So like, for example, with Igni, the one we talked about, which burns the highest unit in a row, you're not going to be getting huge amounts of points out of that unless your opponent either has one gigantic unit, in which case it's good that you have a counter for it, or your opponent has lots of similar strength units, in which case they should know better because they risk Geralt Igni by doing that. So like, there's kind of situations that hold it back, and also only triggers if the row totals 40 or more. So if they're smart, they'll not put all their units on one row, because what you can do is obviously spread out your units across rows so that the rows don't add up to 20. So like, I could have an 18-point unit, and if that's the only unit on the row, then you can't burn it with the Igni, for example. So I agree with you. I think like the way that they've kind of balanced their cards is really good. I think the one thing they're looking at is how uninteractable gold cards are, and whether that's something that they want to change to make them kind of there to be more kind of interplay with gold cards. But on the flip side, I quite like the fact that they're a bit safer than other cards.
Yeah.
Like, there are some cards that interact with gold cards, but not many. And the fact that they're a bit safer, I find, is one of the things I like about them. It's one of the things that gives them their strength and makes them stand out. And the fact that you only have 4, is quite limited. They're already kind of limited in my mind.
Yeah.
But I really didn't play Hearthstone. So I'm like one of the few card gamers who hasn't like spent ridiculous amount of hours playing Hearthstone. Like, I've played a tiny bit here and there, like I understand the basic premise. I know how you win. I understand how it works as a card game. Whereas Gwent is very different because it doesn't use the mana model.
Yeah.
Which a lot of card games these days use. I think the mana model originated in Magic the Gathering, where you get more points per turn to spend on doing things, basically. Gwent doesn't have that. Like, you can play any card on any turn. And you don't really draw much. You don't draw at the end of your turn either. you draw at the end of a round.
Yeah, and you only draw 2 and then 1.
2 and then 1. And yeah, if you have any cards that allow you to draw, but all the cards that allow you to draw end up giving points to your opponent. So it's like, I will give my opponent 10 points and draw a card. So it's designed that, if you want to draw cards, which does obviously help you, you're going to have some kind of negative penalty to yourself.
There's one more Gwent question I wanted to ask, and I knew this was going to be a bit Gwent heavy just because we both play Gwent and a lot of your focus is Gwent. So if people really want to learn Gwent, Jaggerous is the person to go to for her channel, which will be in the description down below, her channel. And the last one I ask is just, what the hell can Scoia'tael do to be not the lowest tier right now? What can they do with him? Because I don't see anyone play Scoia'tael, and when they do, I'm like, oh, free win.
So Scoia'tael, I don't know. In ranked, I've been seeing a bit more Scoia'tael with this patch. They've made this strategy with I call it special dwarves, where basically what you do is you made a bunch of these resilient units, so the ones that stay on the board at the end of the round.
Yeah, and
you just buff them like a butt ton, basically. And if your opponent doesn't have very specific counters, it can be very hard to beat because they can potentially carry something stupid like 70 points across to the next round that you're not going to catch up on. And it does have counters. Obviously, you can burn high strength cards and that sort of thing. But that strategy has been kind of more and more prevalent. The thing with Scoia'tael, though, is the mulligan strategy that you talked about. You have cards that can mulligan. It doesn't really feel fleshed out. There's a bunch of kind of bronze cards that do mulligan stuff, but there's not really a lot of silvers and golds. And I think the silvers and golds are actually where Scoia'tael falls down. And that if you look at the faction-specific silver and gold cards, there just really aren't very many good ones. I did a, which legendary should I craft video, and in that I want to recommend, you should maybe craft this legendary card for this faction. But with Scoia'tael, I've really struggled, in what I suggested to people because most of them are pretty, you're better off running the neutral gold cards than you are the faction-specific ones. Whereas factions like Nilfgaard, that's got loads of interesting gold cards. Similarly with monsters, you're actually playing the faction gold cards, and I think that's part of the reason those factions feel strong. Whereas with Scoia'tael, they have a lot of interesting bronze cards, but they don't have the silver and gold cards that synergize to make them successful. And I think that's maybe the thing that CD Projekt Red needs to look at is the state of their silvers and golds. Maybe add some, maybe change them. And I know that they're making new cards. They did showcase some cool new card art in the patch notes right at the end. There was one for a card that looked like a cockatrice. So from, if you played Witcher 3, you'll know about the Shrieker Witcher contract. So that thing, basically, they've got card art for that. And then one that looked like some kind of Nilfgaard assassin. So we know that they're working on new cards. And that also means new premiums. And Gwent does have the best premiums out of any card game I've ever played. They're little animated ones.
Oh, those are really cool.
Yeah, so rather than just having a gold border, basically, when you play the card, the entire art is animated. It's really awesome. But that's what I would do with Scoia'tael is I'd look at the gold cards and I'd look at the silver cards and I would tweak those and then see how the faction is performing. Because they're archetypes of special cards, mulligan and resilience. They're all decent archetypes. And I think they all have potential to be successful. You just have to find the right balance.
For sure. And I always carry Scorch, so that's kind of why, because I know they're going to overload. I carry Scorch and Lock. So I know if they do resilience, well, now it's actually not resilient, so sucks to be that card. Or just Scorch. Or I also carry Doo-Doo, so I'll just cancel it out by having the same point value.
Yep.
There's things that they just can't. There's things that just counter Scoia'tael a little bit too much, I think.
And those are all starter cards as well, the 3 that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's kind of cute because, obviously at a higher level, nobody runs Scorch or Doo-Doo. Because there's other things you can do to Scorch. And Doo-Doo is never that big of a point swing. At most, it's you catching up, if that makes sense. To something that they have. And basically you typically would run something that reset their point value rather than something that caught you up. So there's just kind of certain nuances. But like you're saying there, those are all cards that are starter cards. So you already have counters to Scoia'tael straight away.
Yeah.
And that those 3 cards that you mentioned, they locking. Well, not locking is not a specific card, but there's lots of cards that lock. Those 3 things, so locking, burning, or Doo-Doo, so catching up. They are all starter cards, and they all pretty much shut down that strategy.
Yeah.
So you're kind of set from the get-go. And because those are your starter, especially silver and gold cards, you're not really running much else at that point because those are the ones you have to begin with. And you're going to be putting 4 gold cards and 6 silvers, so you're going to be running those cards. So you're going to have a counter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I can see like where you're coming from.
Mm.
And I think that's why maybe new players are put off by playing Scoia'tael.
Potentially, yeah, for that one. One last thing to note, just because we mentioned it, uh, the special animation versions of every card has special animation, which is awesome. And my favorite ones are the triple cards, like the Shield Maidens. It's a line of the Shield Maidens fighting, or yeah, like the Crones. So it's the Crones all around one cauldron, which looks really cool. And those are just really nice touches when they have them combined. But also just alone, there's also some pretty nice effects. I think Roach is my favorite because that's the silliest one.
Oh, I love Premium Roach. I have her. She's one of the ones I upgraded nice and early. Because I guess apparently in The Witcher she must have bugged out a lot. Because like you have her on top of a roof and then she's appearing through the sky. And I thought my guess was that they were making a reference to The Witcher because maybe she gets stuck in all sorts of weird and wonderful places.
Yeah.
But then I've since played The Witcher. I have like a Let's Play going on my Gwent channel as well because I was like, oh, this is a good excuse to play The Witcher. And I find like she's not too buggy, but she does have a fantastic premium card, so that's nice.
Well, it has been a while at this point, so they're gonna get the bugs out of the way eventually. But it's because Roach can just be anywhere, I suppose. And so now it's just talking about whatever we want to talk about. Is there anything you want to talk about specifically?
Nothing that I can really think of. Like I mean, is that interesting? How was your Steam Summer Sale?
Oh, I wish I wasn't broke for it. I got a bunch of like $1, $2 stuff. There's just too many good deals. And it always brings up the debate of how does this hurt indies or does it help indies? And for some it helps and for some it hurts. Because everyone waits for the summer sale instead of buying at full price.
Oh, so you're saying that it's harmful to indies because no one's buying them at cost.
It goes both.
Or like at full price.
Like it goes both ways. Like certain indies, it probably hurts them because people are willing to wait, but other ones, like people only considered them because it was on the summer sale. So it's a mixed bag. It always is.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I like the summer sale. I always buy games. To be honest, I buy games and I don't play them. I shouldn't be buying games. I have so many games that I haven't played in my library. I should just be playing those before I buy new ones. But
yeah, on
the flip side, it's always nice to kind of have a look and see if there's anything that you've heard of that you wanted to buy. Like I bought The Witcher 2, for example. I'm going to finish The Witcher 3 first, but then I have The Witcher 2, so then if I want to go onto that and kind of understand a bit more of where the cards come from in Gwent, like that's an option. And that was, very cheap. And that's that kind of game I can understand being on sale because it's been out for yonks and, there's not really that much of a demand for it in general. I know, for example, CDPR have given it away for free in certain promotions as well. So, they clearly aren't looking to cash in on that. But I can see what you're saying about indies. What else did I buy? I bought City Skylines.
That's a good one. Which
I like, but I feel like there's a lot of DLC that I feel like should have been part of the main game. And you have to pay like for the DLC, and the DLCs are quite highly costed. But I think the developers of that game have kind of noted that they've kind of done this. So I think they're kind of changing their model because there was a backlash from the community. I bought 7 Days to Die, and I've been playing so much of that. This is like a zombie survival kind of game, a bit maybe similar to stuff like Rust or like Minecraft, but not 2D. And the zombies are much better. But basically, the zombies get better every day, and then on every 7th day there's like a zombie horde that come, and like each wave the horde gets stronger. So like when you first get them, they're relatively weak, and then they maybe learn to climb or they have different abilities. So I think eventually you do lose. It's an early access game, but I've been playing that with kind of a bunch of friends, and that's been really fun. Like it's got quite a lot of depth to it so far in terms of like what you can build and what you can craft and stuff. And like you can find useful items, but every item kind of has durability. So, you don't necessarily win the game by finding one really good item, because if that wears out, you need to learn different patterns and stuff, or like different schematics in order to use items. So that's something I've been playing like so much of recently. So if you have a bunch of friends, that one is definitely something to keep an eye on. I think it's a really fun game. I actually heard about it about a year ago. I was at a LAN and this guy was like just playing this game, and I was like, what are you playing? And he was basically standing there like crafting thousands of axes and throwing them on the floor, because by crafting axes you level up your construction. So he was just and like he didn't really have much use for them, but you can scrap them and recycle some of the materials, but he was just standing there throwing axes on the floor, and I was just like, what the hell is this game? And now I'm playing this game and I'm just standing there crafting axes and like scrapping them, and I'm just like, I know exactly what he was doing, because especially at nighttime when the zombies come out, basically at nighttime the zombies can run, whereas during the day they can only walk. So during the day that like you can get away from them very easily, but during the night basically they catch you and you have stamina, so they'll catch you and kill you. So you're kind of hiding in your house. So you're hiding in your house just like crafting and scrapping axes just over and over again, so that you can make better axes, for example, for gathering materials.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of those games, and it's like pretty much a massive time sink. I've already played like 9 hours, and I started playing maybe like 2-3 days ago.
Wow.
And this is only playing with friends, basically. I definitely would have been willing to play more, but people are like, "Oh, I need to leave." And I'm like, "Oh, you're ruining my game time," because obviously, like, you wanna ditch your friends. Like, I'm not that sort of a person.
Yeah.
So yeah, Steam Summer Sale I think was good to me.
Yeah. It's good every year. Some big standouts was Shadow of Mordor was like $4.
Yeah, it still is,
And
isn't
that
it?
game, is it still right now? Oh, shoot.
Maybe it's not. They had a free weekend, so maybe it's gone off sale again. But they had a free weekend, and because they had the free weekend, it was still on sale. But they might have ended that now. Well, it's showing as to me at 33 krona, so about $4 at the moment.
Wow,
but the offer ends in 9 hours, so depending on when this video goes live, it might not be available.
It'll be 2 days too late then.
Yeah.
Like that's just a good deal because that's a solid game, and I LP'd it. You can play so many hours on it, and the Nemesis system's really fun. I can't wait for the sequel to come out. Another standout.
Yeah, that's later this year.
Another standout. I know you played at least the first episode. Was Life is Strange.
Oh yeah, no, I've finally gotten around to playing Life is Strange. I'm doing it on my channel, just as a kind of lead up to the DLC.
Same thing.
The prequel, basically. So I've been doing that. I've actually played the first 2 episodes, and the way I did, I know you're doing kind of more, standard Let's Play episode length.
Yeah.
With your one, whereas I was like, I'm going to make 5 episodes, and each episode I'm going to play through 1 episode, even though an episode is like 2 to 3 hours. So they're long videos, but then I figure, if people are busy, they can pause it and come back. Whereas this way, the people who want to see the full episode, because it's obviously a story, and you kind of get into the story.
Yeah.
People who want to see the full episode can do that. I know some of my friends have said, they've played the game before, so they're basically just listening to the playthrough rather than watching it, because they kind of know what happens. So they just want to see my decision making more so than the story. But I played the first 2 episodes, and I'm kind of putting them out like not 1 a week. It's maybe 1 every 2 weeks or so, and that'll fit nicely with the schedule. And I'm actually really enjoying it. But I have too many theories on what's going to happen, and I feel like I'm one of those people who likes to try and predict my games.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm right. I'm not going to say what I think, because I don't want to like taint your current thoughts. But like I'm sitting there just like, okay, well, I reckon that this is how this is going to go down, and I'm really intrigued to see if it happens. So I'm just like really stressed. I'm just like, and like I talk to people, and I'm like, you've played the game, so and you'll be sitting there thinking, oh my god, I can't believe she's figured this out. But you might be thinking, oh my god, I can't believe how wrong she is, and like I have no idea. So I find that quite stressful. But it's a good one. I like me some kind of story driven games for sure. I'm like a big reader. I like to read books, so kind of these more narrative driven games where they tell a story, I enjoy as well. I think it's a good way of telling stories, and so far I've really enjoyed the kind of ideas involved in Life is Strange. I'm just intrigued kind of how they'll do the prequel, because obviously the idea is with Max that she, right? I guess they could follow Chloe's story, but Chloe doesn't have time travel powers.
I think it's supposed to be about Chloe, isn't it? Not Max.
No, but either way, there's going to be no time travel elements. So I'm just wondering,
that's what I'm wondering.
Like what they'll do, whether it'll just be kind of a standard, choices kind of game, and what they'll kind of put into that. And obviously they can't have the outcome change.
That's the problem with prequels.
Yeah, because you're going back in time rather than forward in time. And forward in time, you can do these cool things where your choices, you can import them into the next game. Like they do that, for example, in The Witcher. They do it, in other kind of story-driven games where the next episode you import your choices and then go from there. But obviously, if you go back in time, you can't really export your choices. I don't know. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about, because I'm up to chapter. I finished episode 3. I'm going to start recording episode 4 tomorrow. And 3. Oh my god, I can't wait for you to see that. That's
See, I've just finished 2. 2 will go up on the channel on Wednesday. Yeah, so got to the end of 2.
So intense. 2 is amazing. Wow. What happens to you? I will talk with you about that after the podcast. But 2 was holy crap.
Yeah, like people said to me, it gets really good around by the end of episode 2, and
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. And then I got to the end of episode 2, and I was like, oh, okay, I understand why people are saying that now. It's one of those kind of things. But it's definitely an interesting game, and I think I can understand like wanting to see the choices that other people made because there's all the kind of morality choices and like shades of gray. Do you do this? Do you do that? And I think there's also a lot of reminiscence of like your own experience at high school and kind
Yeah.
of understanding, bullying and the kind of things that happen, when you're a teenager, and whether you should, step in. Like, should you step in, and stop someone getting bullied when then you become a target? Is that the right decision? And you can kind of see both sides of the coin, because obviously at the same time, you don't want to make your own life more difficult, and like not knowing the things that other people are going through. You kind of have that realization that everyone's a person, everyone has their own problems, and just because you don't know about them doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Yeah. Now, this does lead to two questions related to Life is Strange, just talking about this. One is, when the shoe drops, when the time travel powers happen, what was your reaction? Because for me, I was like, this game's alright, and then that happens like, oh, alright, now I'm in.
So for me, the funniest thing was I was doing the Let's Play, and it has this intro being like, the decisions that you make will affect the past, the present, and the future. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
well, how are they going to affect the past unless you can travel in time? Like, I was just like, okay, whatever. And then it happened. I was like, I accidentally totally called this, um, by saying that with the intro. But I like
Yeah.
it. I think that it's kind of cool that you can also see the outcome of both choices before you decide on which one that you make. Although
Yeah.
typically I've not been doing that because I feel like I should go with my gut and like my initial choice. I feel like, if I can see both choices, that's going to influence my decision.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just want to go with my gut instinct. So I don't know. But I like it as a mechanic. I like the little puzzles that they've kind of put in that involve that kind of mechanic. And I think time travel is one of those things in games that can be really well done. Like Braid, for example, as an indie game that
Oh.
has really good time travel mechanics.
Oh
I
wow,
think if
yeah.
when games get it right, they can get it really right. I think you just have to be a little bit careful with time travel because obviously it can get quite convoluted and confusing.
Very. Oh, very. And with that, this leads to the other question, because you're talking about it, is when you're doing your choices in these games, is it your interpretation of what you think the character would do, or how you would do it if you were in that situation?
I mean, I feel like I kind of put myself in the position of the character anyway. So like the character here is me. Like especially with Max, you don't really get that much of a backstory about her. I don't think I make choices that Max would make, for example, because I get the impression that she doesn't like stick up for herself and she's a bit of a pushover and she's kind of a bit of a the kind of nerdy girl who doesn't really get involved. Is kind of like a bystander and doesn't have much to say for herself, because that kind of is the interaction with a lot of the characters when I talk to them. It's like, oh, you're finally saying something, and I'm like, well, I've been saying loads of things because I'm playing, and
Yeah.
I have a big mouth, so I think I put myself in that position. But ultimately, in these sort of games, I always end up making choices, based on my morality. So I always end up being freaking good. I'm like so bad at being evil. Like in Fable 2, I was like 100% good and 100% pure, and I had all these
Oh.
houses. I didn't charge anyone any rent and stuff. And I was like, ultimately, I'm like kind of shooting myself in the foot. Like I'm probably like good to a fault in all of these sorts of games. And that's kind of been the case with my Witcher playthrough as well. Where you've obviously got a lot of choices, and generally speaking, I do make the kind of, or I try and make the good choice. But I'm kind of starting to realize in a lot of these games it's shades of gray, and with shades of gray choices, I find it very stressful because then I like,
That's Witcher.
yep. So I think generally I make the choices that I would make rather than the choices that like necessarily the character would make. So for example, with Geralt, I think Witchers are meant to kind of they like help for money and they don't really get involved in the kind of moral side of things. That's what kind of, I had this cutscene and he was like, "Oh, Witchers don't really do this," and I was like, "Well, this Witcher is very moral and very opinionated about things, and he's going to do his best to make sure everything works out okay."
Oh yeah.
So yeah. I mean, what about you? Are you more
Uh,
in the character or in
Mine
like your
is, it's my interpretation of the character. It's what it is, but at the same time, it is your lens of it. So when I see Max, I see her as, once she got the powers, she started getting galvanized by it. So she starts jumping out a little bit more in my interpretation of her.
yeah.
she's like, "Look, I'm a superhero now. I'm gonna strut a little bit, and because I have time powers, I can back off if I want."
Yep.
And so that's my interpretation of her. So I'm having her go out there a little bit, and sometimes I have her do both choices because like I think she'd be indecisive, so she wants to see both. But there are times where I'm like, oh, we have to see the both sides of this because they're gonna be the one I don't want to do. I know is gonna be hilarious. So let's see the
Yeah.
other side of it, just for the viewer, and then I'll make my choice.
Yep, I can understand that.
And like, it's just fun with that with the choices and everything. And yeah, you're talking about Witcher. You get a lot of choices there. It's very gray in Witcher. Oh man.
Yeah, I get a lot of comments being like, "Oh, if you'd done the other choice, this would have happened," or like, "This is the choice that I made compared to you," and I'm just like, "Oh, now I see. Now I want to know what happens with my choices." Like, my community is really good at not spoiling things, but we definitely kind of talk about the choices and then about the shades of gray and the different choices that we made and like opinions on characters. It's there's normally some good kind of discussion. On top of that, they teach me all of the little nuances about the game that you wouldn't know otherwise. Like, for example, if you hold down your attack button whilst you're riding your horse, then you do a slow motion attack. So you can actually do horse-based combat. I did not know this. I was like trying to slash at guys, and I was just like, screw it, I'll get off my horse.
Yeah.
For example, if you use Quen on yourself when you're bleeding, that stops bleeding. There's all these like things that I just wouldn't know about the game. And they're like, by the way, I see that you're having trouble with this situation. Did you know that you can do this? And I'm like, I did not know this. So now I'm like, whenever I play these kind of single player games, I feel like I should just let's play them because you get so many little tips that you wouldn't get otherwise. For example, there's a bit where I was underwater, and if you're underwater, you can crossbow. You can use your crossbow underwater, so you can shoot the drowners with your crossbow. And then I got this comment from someone being like, I never knew that you could crossbow drowners. So he would just like swim through them and just get attacked and be like, oh, this is horrible. Whereas you can just kill them and kind of get on with your life. So there's a lot of kind of little things that I think I like about the community and little tips that you could get just through comments and stuff without getting spoilers, obviously.
Yeah, like a good community, like if you can get a community like that, that's amazing. Like they'll give you tips and everything. It's weird, like when you get bigger, you have, which is the weirdest one, is the commenter who just enjoys tearing you down. Like there's this weird commenter that will show up where they just every video is just them talking about how much you suck, and they just enjoy doing that.
Yeah,
it's a weird person. That's just so weird that exists. Like they're a fan apparently. They watch every video. They comment in every video. It's like, but they like insulting. It's really weird.
No, I know what you mean. It's like how you get like that every video gets at least that one dislike. And there's someone who's coming here and being like, I dislike you and I dislike your content, but I'm going to click on your content to click dislike to make that point. And I'm just like, you do you, random disliker. If that makes you happy, that's fine.
It's a weird thing. And there are the ones who do spoils. And like, for me, I've always been like, yeah, don't spoil people. Like it's for people like, we're on this journey together. If you do know this stuff, like you can give like hints, helpful hints and stuff, and those are the best ones. And they give helpful hints, or they're like they can't wait to see what choice you make or your reaction to something later on.
I think
like those are the fun ones.
Yeah, I think most people don't, and I think like the people who do spoil, they typically do it, right as a game is out. Like for example, let's say you're spoiling, I don't know, Harry Potter or something. Like the people who were spoiling Harry Potter were doing it like right as the book came out. So they'd rush through the book and then they'd post the spoilers everywhere while it was popular.
Yeah.
And while it was but like once like something dies down, you get far fewer people posting, spoilers and stuff because the people who are doing it have gotten bored and moved on to something else. And everyone else is just there for the content. So that's why I like playing something like Life is Strange or something a little bit after the fact. Like now, you're probably much safer from those kind of things than you would have been if you had played it when it first, like when each episode was coming out.
Yeah, like that's what I've learned, and you're kind of behind the boat on that when you do that, but you get a richer experience because you're not getting spoiled, and your viewers aren't getting spoiled either. Because people just love doing that. Like when Star Wars when Awakening first came out, people were just throwing out that spoil. When it was the fifth book of Harry Potter, Who Kills Dumbledore, that one got thrown at everyone. Just people really like doing that. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that some people are into. But like, I think you're never going to be able to relate to these people because you're not like them. So it's not something that you're ever going to really be able to understand. That's kind of my take on it. And I think if you do content creation, there's always going to be the negative people. And generally, like, I'm not bothered with it. I think the only time I was really particularly bothered was when I was making deck guides for this game called Chronicle, which was the RuneScape card game. It's kind of since kind of died, but I got basically sent cards by Jagex, and they were like you could reveal these cards to the community, and then a couple other people I know also got sent some cards. So I did my card reveal, and in it we were revealing. I think I was revealing some ogre cards, and like this person was like, "Oh, look, an ogre revealing ogre." So they were basically calling me an ogre, and I was like, dude, whatever. But then I was watching my friend's card reveal, and the same person was in their comments commenting nice things. So then I was like, that was kind of like the thing that got me is like, you always assume that people who are dicks to everyone. So it was like, no, you're only just being a dick to me. So it's like, that was kind of like, oh, it's kind of horrible when you see the good in people and then, realize that they're being especially mean to you. If that makes sense. Like you just kind of assume everyone was, and I just remember being like, I can see that you can be a decent person. So you're clearly targeting me. And generally when that happens, it's usually a gender thing. When you see someone who's kind to male gamers but kind of mean to female gamers, like I don't think he was specifically being mean to me, and because it was like a appearance based comment. Generally, when you get negative comments as a woman, they're appearance based. You're like, you're always fat, you're ugly. You don't really get you're bad at games. I think guys get more if you like. I think if people want to insult male YouTubers, they're like, you're rubbish at this game. Whereas if they want to insult women, they typically go after their appearance. Although the worst one I get, or not the worst one I get that is people who mean well, and they're like, that they're like, oh, you're surprisingly good at this game for a girl, or like, it's refreshing to see a female YouTuber that isn't like a titty streamer, or like, or like is actually good at their game. And it's like, I realize you're trying to compliment me and be like, you're really good at this game, congratulations. But for some reason, like they need to do it in a way that then insults all the women. Yeah. And I'm like, this is not the compliment that you think it is. And it doesn't really bother me because I understand that they're trying to be nice.
Yeah.
It's just really funny in the kind of misguided way that they go about it. It's just like,
it's
like all other women are rubbish, but you're great. It's just like, thanks.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
I find it quite funny, and that's actually surprisingly common because I think people do generally mean well. And the worst part is like, I mean, I'm sure there are like girls that are rubbish at games for sure, but there's also guys that are rubbish for games.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to be that like they don't get noticed as much. I don't know what it is. Like you never see a comment on a guy's profile like, you're pretty good at this game for a guy. Like it doesn't happen.
You don't, yeah.
It's just like, oh, you're pretty good at this game. That's all that they say. It's not like, well, like lots of other male streamers are rubbish at their game. Because like lots of people are not very good at games. Like the vast majority of people are average, Like they're not like, oh, most people are average, but you're pretty good. Like that's not really an insult. That's a fact. But they'll be like, oh, well, you're pretty good. But like everyone else I've seen play this game is like, I don't know. It doesn't happen. And I just think it's quite funny.
Wow. Yeah. That's... Like, it makes me laugh. I'm like, oh, that's terrible, but it's funny, but terrible. Like, oh, jeez. Because girl gamers have been around as long as guy gamers have. It's just weird.
I think it's one of these things that will become less and less prevalent as gaming becomes more and more mainstream. Yeah. And I do think generally the target audience for games is male. Like, if I look at my Gwent video target audience, I think I'm in like 90-something% male. Like, the kind of audience for my videos, I think Gwent in general is generally, it seems to be very male biased. So I can kind of understand then that women as the, like, generally men are attracted to women in most cases. It's more common for people to be straight than gay. So then women have that allure that they're also the gender that you're attracted to. Whereas, if you're watching a streamer that's like the same, that like that's a gender that you're not attracted to, you're not ever going to have that thought like, oh, they're kind of cute. Or, in a alternate universe, if I met someone like that, I'd be into them. You don't really have that thought. So then I think maybe that's why the female gamers get this weird attention that maybe male gamers don't get.
Huh.
But this is a topic that's had like millions of, just like loads of discussion on it by a whole bunch of people. And generally I don't feel like it's too bad. The kind of the gender issue. I think people sometimes make it out to be more of a problem than it is.
Oh, okay.
I think it's kind of a problem if you let it become a problem, and your community is as good as you curate it to be. So if you curate a very positive community, then it doesn't happen too much.
Yeah, that's true. If we want to talk about that, we could talk about that next time for sure. If you want to talk more about gender stuff with games,
Yeah, it's a whole can of worms. We'll probably leave it closed for today.
because one thing will lead to another with that one, and so we will have you around again, so we can talk about that if we want. And to end this out, one more topic before we end it out. Actually, this is one that has been a curious thought, just bouncing around. Let's see, what free to play games you played that gives you like a chest? You've played like Overwatch and Gwent. Uh, have you played
Heroes of
Heroes
the
of the
Storm has
Storm?
them now. Yeah, I played a lot of Heroes of the Storm.
Alright, so like Heroes of the Storm lets you reroll. And then like Hearthstone, you don't play Hearthstone, but Hearthstone they made it you can no longer get duplicate legendaries now. They've done that. Uh Gwent, you get 4 cards and you get to choose the 5th one out of 3 cards.
Yeah, of the same rarity.
Of the same rarity, which is nice. I keep getting golds at that point, which is nice. And Overwatch, what they're making it is you're gonna get duplicates less. And like, do you think that any of these is the most fair one? Do you think there's a more fairer way that the loot box can be like a loot box can be done or keg or whatever? Or do you think maybe like yeah, between that, do you think one of them has like the best one or if there's an even better idea that could work out?
I mean, ultimately, I think like loot boxes and kegs and card packs is a system designed to make money because
Yeah.
you risk getting something that you already have and then getting less value from it than if you could just directly buy everything that you wanted. Like, I understand that like that's why the system exists, but I think in a free to play game, you kind of need a system like that. I mean, Overwatch is not a free game, but
Oh yeah, yeah. Sure.
but still, I think. Well, actually, I don't know. Overwatch's system I think is a bit weird because it's not a free game. But then you get paid games that have paid skins, and this is just the way that they've chosen to do it. I don't know. I think it's a difficult one. Like the fact that you can't get duplicate legendaries in Hearthstone sounds like a really good idea, but that's obviously multiple years in the making. Like the game's been out
Yeah.
for yonks, so that obviously wasn't the state when it first came out. I think it's a difficult one. Like I don't think there's ever going to be a best system. Like ideally, I would like to be able to pay like 60 quid and have all of the cards, but that's never going to exist because they'd make a lot. Like I've already spent more than 60 quid on Gwent, so
Oh,
there's
nice.
a reason they have the system that they have. I don't know. I don't think it's. I think you have to find a balance between obviously the community, not the community, the developers making money and it being a kind of fair price point for the consumer. And I think with like stuff like Overwatch, you get skins for free. You don't have to spend money. And typically, like I don't buy chests in those kind of games. So it's for the cosmetics. Whereas in card games, you need the cards to play the game.
That is
So
a
I
big
think
difference, yeah.
in that situation, you have to be a little bit more fair to your consumer and a little bit more competitive because there are people who spend money for sure. And I think with Gwen and stuff, it's entirely possible to go free to play. But I found I wanted more variation in my decks, and because I do content now, I make all
Yeah.
these deck videos. I kind of have to have a good collection.
Yeah.
So then I kind of invested. Well, I originally invested because I wanted to play something other than monsters, and I was like, well, if I buy some kegs, this will get me some new cards, and I can make a new deck. But I have commenters who play entirely free to play, and that works. And I think if I didn't make YouTube content, I would have been a free to play player, and that would have been fine. But that's because now the game is very young. It's still in it's an open beta, so the collection is not that big that it's not daunting. Whereas I have no interest in playing Hearthstone because the collection is so big that I feel like,
Yeah.
if I ever wanted to get into Hearthstone, I'd have to invest a butt ton of money just to be able to play it. And that puts me off, so I don't play it. So it's I don't know, it's a difficult one. What do you think?
Well, for sure with just on the last thing is yeah, with Hearthstone, the more cards there are, the more daunting it gets. That's why they had to do seasons, which is kind of what Magic does as well, where it's the most relevant ones are the most recent and like a year back. So that you only have to worry about these cards specifically if you want to be competitive and ranked and such. And so because I made a bunch of content for Hearthstone, it was spending like 50 every expansion and getting a bunch of the cards, so I actually would have ready. I could actually dive into it and do stuff. And that I noticed with Gwent is, yeah, playing is free to play. I am like I there's not as much variety in my decks because I am playing free to play. So I'll get stuff in kegs. I'm like, oh, this will be great when I get a couple more cards. This will be
Yeah.
great when I get a couple more. Like I keep thinking, like I have some ideas, but I don't have what I need to do those ideas yet. Is the thing, And that's by playing free to play. If I really want more variety, I need to put in some money, I think. But
Mm-hmm.
you're getting like a keg a day, or you can get 1 or 2 kegs a day depending on how much you play, because
Yeah.
the 6 crowns bonus and then level up bonuses, and just getting a little bit every time, and the good games and everything.
Yeah, they're pretty generous. They've also made it in rank so you don't lose MMR up to 1,000. So
Oh
then
yeah,
very new players can get to 1,000 MMR just with enough games because like you don't lose any for losing. And if you do that, you do get rewards. Like the reason I started playing ranked was because I got a bunch of free kegs basically and free ore, and like I ranked up recently and it gave me like 5 kegs for example, and like that's
ooh,
that's the rewards for when you rank up are generous. So it's kind of worth playing ranked for the rewards alone, even if you're not like that fussed about the rank that you achieve.
huh,
So I
nice.
think they're pretty good about it, about kind of trying to get there to be options for the people who want to like go free to play, that you can definitely get these things by investing time, and it doesn't have to
Oh,
be a crazy amount of time either.
that's nice. Like, I'm only level 7 because I've been doing like 6 crowns a day basically, so it's just a
Yep.
couple matches. So I'm not at ranked yet, but it's good to know that the rewards are pretty nice there. On the topic question though, I really like Hearthstones because you get the reroll. I mean, not Hearthstone. I really like Hots because you get the reroll.
Yep.
But as far as cards go, I really like Gwent because for Hearthstones you just get 5 cards. Gwent, you get 4 cards. You get to pick the fifth one. I like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to build up a collection without getting duplicates. And if you want to go for a specific deck strategy or faction, let's say you're making a Nilfgaard deck and you get a choice, then you can get the legendaries that you need for Nilfgaard first. So it helps you kind of build the decks that you want to build. So then as a newer player, like you're saying, I'm missing a few cards, but you should be getting the choices for those cards, because the final card that you get a choice of will always be a rare, an epic, or a legendary card. So a blue, a purple, or a yellow rarity, and it'll be one of three. So then it's good in that you can start to get the stuff that you need for the decks that you want to play, and that's something that I like.
Yeah, and something else I like is the animated cards can be in the kegs as well.
Yep.
I really like that. I end up always choosing the animated gold though. Like,
Oh, you definitely should. I think it's 100% worth picking a premium because they're way rarer. And I feel like if you intend to play the game kind of long term, then that is the kind of direction that you should go in.
they just look so nice. They just look so
Oh,
nice.
they're really high quality. Like even if you're not interested in Gwent, like go and find some like examples of their premium cards, and you'll start to understand why we're just like, oh, these premium cards though.
They're so cool. I really like them. That's a nice touch. Like, I want to go for the triple crone, so I'm like, oh, I got one. I just need to find the other two and just keep getting kegs for those. And if I got the animated one, it'd be so cool to see that.
Hmm.
But one more thing with this topic, and then we'll head out. Is this? Do you think this is too good of a deal? Would be you get the roll, and you get whatever items, like say in HOTS, and then you get to pick the ones you want to keep, and then re-roll one more time. Do you think that's too generous?
I don't know. I think the whole point of a reroll is you take a risk. And like typically, I'll only reroll if I get like 4 commons, for example, because you can
Oh
get that in
yeah,
Hot.
yeah,
Um, I think the thing with rerolls is that they put it in there to try and drain the gold out of the game, so that instead of
and they
spending
have.
your gold on champions, you're spending it on rerolls. And ultimately, I don't reroll that often because I want to buy. I'd rather have more heroes, so I can kind of understand why it exists. I think like being able to pick your own and then reroll would make it fairer, but ultimately, if you're keeping 1 or 2 items from a chest anyway, what's the point in rerolling it? You're only then rerolling 2 items, and that seems like a waste of money to me. So I think I like the reroll feature because it kind of, you can use it on situations where you were particularly unlucky, but overall, I think that you're better off not.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I've had the luck of getting a legendary hero once or twice in there.
I think,
I've drained at least 15,000 gold, so it became worth.
yeah, I think the bigger problem with HOTS is how you get the loot chests. Like you only
Uh,
get them when you level up heroes, but like
yeah,
as you level up heroes, it gets slower to level up heroes, so then you get them less frequently. And I feel like the idea behind loot chests is like to encourage you to obviously buy loot chests, but also to reward play. But it gets to the point where, like for me, when they added the system, because I played so much, I missed out on a lot of chests that I would have gotten if I'd played naturally through the whole system.
Yeah.
So for me, that's like where the issue lies. I feel like, you should maybe be giving out chests every 4 games rather than maybe every character level, because obviously as you level up the character, it gets much, much slower to level them up to the point where you maybe have to play like 20 plus games as a character. Whereas in Overwatch, you get them just by playing, you get XP every game, and then yes, it gets slower to level up, but then it resets, every 100 levels, so it's not too bad.
Well, they made it every level's the same now.
Oh, okay.
So it's just even. It's an even run every time for Overwatch. So yeah, that's true. Heck, even just make the 8 wins thing the chest or something.
Yeah, I just think they could maybe make it a bit more lucrative to encourage people to be coming back and playing every day, because that's the thing you want people to come back and play.
Yeah.
And yes, they have the daily quest system, but HOTS is not one of those games I come back to every day. Whereas like Gwent, I'll come back just to get my 6 wins, to get that keg. And yes, I'm probably more invested in Gwent, but I have been very invested in HOTS in the past.
Yeah.
So it's not like something I've never really played. I think my count level is something like 280 or something. Like it's decently leveled, and that's like your cumulative level across all your characters. So yeah, I think there is something that they could do, but I kind of like the change to loot chests in HOTS, because then at least I'm getting skins, whereas previously, I wasn't really buying skins, so I didn't have any. Now you at least get a few, so it kind of works out.
Yeah, I like that access to skins, and there's some pretty good ones. I can talk about just how good those skins are, but before digressing, one last thing, then we head out, and this is just a quick one. That is, how much rage do you get when you give the GG and you don't get a GG in Gwent?
It doesn't bother me too much. I think I basically always give a GG.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, the way that it works. So we're going to talk game theory. The optimal strategy is that you should always send a GG, and if someone doesn't send you a GG back, you should write down their name, such that if you ever meet them again, you then don't send them a GG. It's called the tit for tat strategy. It's like, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. But if you burn me, then you will face the fury of 1,000 raging suns. So that would be the optimal strategy. But I mean, I can kind of understand like people being salty, and then this is like a little bit of like, yeah, well, you don't get a GG, a little bit of a relief from the salt for them. So it doesn't bother me too much. Plus, I play so much Gwent that it does happen, and sometimes the GG button is bugged, so maybe they had a bugged GG button, and that's why it didn't work out. The one thing though is like if you win and then at the end and that you've won, and then you then start emoting, like that's the only situation where I usually still give a GG. Or if you play a situation where you're not playing to win. So once I played this game where I passed, and then my opponent just played all of their cards and then passed, and then I was like, well, you can't. But it wasn't a situation where playing all of their cards could win them the second round. Like there are some strategies where that works out. Very few strategies, but some. They were just like playing all of their cards, and I think they were just fanning around. And in that situation, I was like, well, you didn't really even try, so I don't want to give you a GG. But then when I was clicking through the next, to see the screen, if you keep clicking in the same spot, the GG button then moves into that spot. And so then I still gave them a GG, and I was like, I'm so mad. Like, you did not deserve that. But ultimately, like, I think that you should send GGs, but I can kind of understand situations where people don't. And I feel like if you do emote, like if I win and then I emote at the end, in a kind of rubbing it in kind of way, I fully expect not to get a GG. And sometimes, like, if I make a play that I feel like would have made the other player salty, I'll be there like, oh, is he going to give me a GG? And usually they do, actually. Usually people send them. I think people are more often, like, more people send them than don't. But, sometimes I'm like, oh, I completely did this play that completely ruined their day. Like, if I were them, I would be pretty mad. So then I try and predict the people who won't send them.
Oh, wow.
And just for clarity's sake, the GG is something in Gwent where at the end of a game you can send a good game to your opponent, and if you do that, they get a small reward, whether it be a little bit of ore, which you can use to buy kegs, or a little bit of scrap that you can use to craft cards, for example. So it's just like a little, handshake kind of situation. That's the way I see it, though, is a GG is a handshake, whereas, from my days of Smite, I know that people don't necessarily see GG as a handshake. Like, if you beat them, and you say GG and they don't feel like it was a good game, they'll be like, why GG? It was clearly a rubbish game. Our Bakasura fed the whole game and our niece disconnected. And it's like, well, the GG isn't necessary to say this was the best game I've ever played. It's like to shake your hand at the end of the match and be like, thank you for participating kind of thing. Like, that's the way I see a GG anyway, is like thanks for your time kind of thing. It's like, when footballers at the end of the match, like, or at the start of the match, they all shake hands or whatever. Like that, it's that kind of thing. It's just good sportsmanship.
Yeah.
But I can understand why people see it the other way, because it literally is a good game.
I just hate it when they don't do it. I want my ore. I want my scraps. I gave you ore and scraps. Where's mine?
The thing is, like, I think part of the problem is it notifies you. So, like, what you can do is you can be like, well, I won't send a GG unless they send a GG. So you can wait to see the notification. But if both people do that, then neither of you send a GG.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, well, I may as well send one. And then if they send one back, good. And if they don't send one back, whatever.
I'll always send it unless I somehow absentmindedly forget to hit the button.
Eh.
But, like, if my opponent just doesn't send, I'm like, what? Come on. I gave you a thing. Give me a thing.
See, I found in my YouTube videos as well, if I don't show me pressing the GG button before I cut to, like, the next game, the comments will be like, why didn't you send that person a GG? Like, what's wrong with you? So I always know, I make sure I'm like, click GG. There they go. They've seen me do it. Yeah. And then we'll load in the next match. Because if I fade it, like, while I'm editing out the in-between bit of, like, clicking through the menus and stuff, then sometimes people will be like, why didn't you send a GG? Like, why do you hate him?
Like, I've been in a hurry to get the next match where I will just click skip forgetting GG's a thing. I've done that, but... Oh, man. Okay, so we have gone quite a bit here, and there's still plenty we could talk about, so it'll have to be for next time. And so the last thing to just end this whole thing out is, since I got content creators here, is just advice for anyone who wants to do content creation. Just one bit of advice.
One bit? Oh, man. You're making it more difficult. I think... I'm trying to think what the best... There's all sorts of things. Like, consistency is obviously important. And learning how to do your tags is important. And
okay, bear in mind we're out. I'm kidding.
But bear in mind that your tags is something that YouTube, the YouTube search engine algorithm changes. That's not consistent. They didn't just do it and then we're like, we're done. So when, like, if you're tagging your videos, make sure that you're reading about tagging your videos every few months to make sure that you're doing it in the best way. Because obviously the system kind of changes. But other than that, I think, just try, like, when you first start, you're not going to probably be that good in terms of editing and stuff. Like, that's something that you learn just with practice. Like, I definitely am a far better editor now than I was when I was 15. Like, I'm just going to put that one out there. I don't put loads of fancy effects in my video just because I can, because I'm like, oh, look, I've learned how to use this effect. Now everything is green. Like, that's not happening anymore. But the one thing I would say is, like, invest a little bit in a decent mic. I think the mic is how, you interact with your audience mostly, especially if you're doing gaming stuff. If you have a face cam, that's great. But the mic is how your audience interacts with you. And the best way for me to turn off a stream or a YouTube video is if the mic quality is just really, really bad to the point where it's uncomfortable to listen to. I think that's my tip, I would say, is, and it doesn't have to be a crazy expensive mic. Like, you can get like a maybe $20, $30 headset that's got a all right mic attached to the point where you don't sound like a robot. But for example, if you're recording through your webcam mic, like, webcam mics are just awful, or like just like a crappy kind of wired mic, the ones that you buy really cheap. There's definitely, like, sometimes my recording will accidentally revert to my webcam mic and I'm just like, well, I can't use this. This audio is completely unusable just because of how poor the sound quality is compared to if I use my nice mic. So that's what I would say. Decent mic, because that's basically how people, that's how you interact with people. And, like, yes, being able to record in nice quality is important, but, like, if you're limited in your hardware in terms of your computer, just play games that are fairly simple. You can still build an audience that way, but you can't build an audience if no one can understand what you're saying.
That is for sure. And so we have been basically having a podcast here with Jaggerous, and we talked a lot about Gwent and a few other topics, and that is what this podcast is. What I'm trying for is just conversation, just interesting talking stuff. There's so many things we still could have talked about, we just didn't have time for. But luckily, we're going to see Jag again in the future. Don't know when, but in the future.
And then if it's no good, you can rewind and I'll change my answer. It'll be fine.
There you go. I want to type with that for a minute after, but just to end it out, where can everyone find you?
Okay, so if you want to find me, in terms of Twitter, I'm at Jaggerous. Twitch, I'm Jaggerous. My personal YouTube channel is Jaggerous. YouTube.com/Jaggerous. But you can also find me on the Kilobits, youtube.com/Kilobits. And my address, no.
It's Jaggerous Street.
Yeah,
hey,
Jaggerous.
I got
Number 1 Jaggerous Street in Jaggerousville, Jaggerous. Postcode JA99.
Eccentric billionaire goals. Just own everything that says your name, and there you go.
No, put your name on everything.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
You have it's the same effect.
There you go. That is basically a podcast. If you had feedback, please give it up. Just how things can be better. I know there's some things that could have been better. Like I could have explained some of the Gwent stuff as we were going instead of us explaining it later on. And just presenting things better. But whatever thoughts on how we could do it better, let me know for dang sure. And all of Jaggerous' information will be down below. And we will see her again in the future. She's a fun person to talk to. So thanks for coming by, everyone. And hope you had fun listening and watching. And see you next time.
Yay.